Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. I always have guests on my show that are very interesting because, for the most part, a lot of them have done so many different things in their lives that have made them very special. And the two people I have today are a mother and son who have done so many different things together, and it's kind of a wonderful thing to hear that a family is working together and have found out that they're able to do things that are just sensational. And my guests are C.B. and Dan Hoffmann. And C.B. Hoffmann and Dan have created and self-published 6 eBooks, 3 audiobooks, and a short film about a fashion designer who is blackmailed into being an assassin. They're doing it all on their own, which is one of the reasons that I think they're incredibly interesting, because to do this on your own is not easy. And what do? They write, they edit, they design book covers. They are producing the ebooks to recordings and producing audiobooks, shooting and editing video and marketing and promotion. And just thinking about it makes me tired, the both of you. I just want you to know that. Now, the most interesting part of what they told me is that God inspired their dream, and they would love to share it with our audience. And that is what I think is most interesting, is that this faith-based? Are you religious people who have found out that there's so much to be told about how religion affects your life?
Well, thanks for having us first. That's a very tough question. I'm going to let you start with that one, CB.
Okay, I don't consider it religion. I just consider it a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
And what really happened was the day before I set foot into my very first classroom, that night before, I received in a dream the first and last lines of this book. And I realized, because the last line has God's name in it, I realized, oh, I know where this is from. I didn't know where it was going, because the first line is about an assassin, and the last line is about what happens to her. And I was thinking, okay, how do I get from A to Z? And so I wrote the first 3 chapters about 14 different times and deleted them and started over again until I got what I really wanted. And it just, what I have to say in the book is about a woman who has backslidden, who has gone the wrong way, and who has forgotten about God, and she's on her way to the wrong ending. And it all comes about like most of us. I mean, she's rebellious, and she's wanting to live her own life and be her own boss, and eventually things happen, and she winds up making a U-turn and starting the long journey back. All my books have themes of repentance, forgiveness, and reconciliation, but they don't cover up the facts of what life is really like for most of us.
CB, that's one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you. You know, we're living in tumultuous times. Not that this is unique to a lot of other times, because wars have existed for years. I mean, through the time immemorial, if you will. And, you know, today people have to compete to find opportunities for themselves. They're living sort of on the edge. People are working, they're working years and years, years and years. They are working years and years, but they're working hours upon hours, and they're trying to make enough money to even pay their rent. Dan,
exactly.
You know, when I say, I'm sorry, please, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been there. I know what you're talking about,
Yeah, and so as a result of that, you know, they sometimes find themselves in very strange positions where, I mean, it's not it's not right. It's certainly wrong, but they go in the wrong direction. A lot of people because they're living a tough life and they don't want it to be that way. Dan, don't you see that? And I mean, you're in a business that is very competitive and tough, and you're just going through it and you're doing it. What inspires you to work so hard?
Well, so these books were a passion project, a side hustle for us for about a decade. And, I was growing up, and CB was always an English teacher, and, she always had these books that she was working on. And back when I first started in graphic design, I didn't even actually have a degree in graphic design. I got hired internally at an engineering firm. So, I was designing these really bad book covers for her. And then I moved up to New York, got a job up there, transferred to a design school up there, and started learning some better practices, getting some really awesome professional experience. And just one day, I reached out to CB. We were talking on the phone, and I said, hey, whatever happened with your books? Because she had lined up a publisher, and the publisher was a small-time publisher, and she had received some devastating health news and had to close the business. And then so I guess CB was going to take a break and maybe table it indefinitely. And I just said, hey, so what's going on? And she's like, oh, it's kind of done. And I said, well, let me hear a little. And she said, no, I don't want to. She was a little discouraged. And I said, just read me a little bit. And so she went over and got the book. And then she said, she was accustomed to coming here. She was an assassin embroiled in a sultry web of blackmail and deceit. And I said, what? So, from that, if I wouldn't have thought that the books were excellent, I wouldn't have wanted to get involved. If she would have read something that was boring, I would have said, oh, cool, well, best of luck. I'll pray for you, whatever. And, but, I was instantly hooked. From that one sentence, she read the first paragraph, the first chapter, and before you know it, we were comparing notes and editing and writing, and I said, this has to be a trilogy. This is you're trying to cram too much into one book, and before you know it, we started working together, and so. I guess to get back to your question about going the wrong path and doing things, and this was always a side hustle to me. I was always, going to school and working, or working full time, and always doing some overtime in New York, and still trying to make time to work on this just because I've always believed in it. And CB would come home after teaching all day, and then grade papers all night, and then still find some time to work on it, and or during the summer, so it's always been we've always been passionate and always, had the belief that, there was something great meant for these. And that's what's kept us going, because it kind of started with that one book. And then from there I said, audiobooks are becoming big. Audiobooks are on the rise 30% practically every year. She said she wanted to send the book to me, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to have time to read it, just because when would I have time? And so I'm always listening to podcasts and to, music on my headphones on the trains in New York. And so I said, audiobooks are on the rise. Everyone wants to be, you can only listen to so much music before you want to learn and be entertained, with a book or some quality fiction or something. And so we said, we got to record audiobooks. And so he's like, I don't know how to record audiobooks.
There's a but there. But you learned quickly because you know what, Dan? I have a suspicion that, some people, they're left-brained, some people are right-brained. And in your particular case, I think you've got both, frankly.
We want to surround and write and collaborate, but marketing and promotion is the most difficult part. So we have these 6 books, and I'm like, we could write 30 books. And in my opinion, they would all be good. And, if nobody knows about them, then no one's going to read them, and no one's going to be changed, hopefully, and or entertained, and or, give us feedback and say, oh, this really helped me get through a tough time or anything like that. And for us, it's always been about getting the message out. And so we're trying to take this time to focus on, telling people, about them. And so to me, that's the real challenge is the business side. It's fun and write and to collaborate and brainstorm and be like, okay, she's a fashion designer, blackmailed into being an assassin because she was training for the Olympics and sharpshooting, and her father was a preacher on the take, and then we got this bad guy, and my grandma said that she saw an angel one time, and CB's told me about that story so many times. So we're gonna work that into the 3rd book, and we're gonna. It's to me, that's the super exciting part. And, the hard part is competing with marketing dollars and getting the word out. That's right. For independent publishers, that's almost a like a Goliath that you have to slay.
When you listen to Dan discuss this kind of challenge that he's dealing with regard to the marketing side of things and the business side of things, and you're dealing with coming up with the ideas, how does that mesh? How are you
actually, we're both working on all of it. Of course, I'm not in the graphic design area, but the marketing and promoting, we're both committed to that. And it is the inspiration of the book, knowing that there is a message of love in there that is worthwhile. That's what keeps us going.
When you say love, describe what you mean about, or define, if you will, the word love. Love based upon passion, love based upon sex. What kind of love are you trying to get across to your audience who reads the books?
Yeah, well, we have romance in the book, but we don't have sex. But
I'm not sure how writing a sex scene with your mom would work anyway, but go ahead.
No, that wouldn't be too good. No. But love to me is unconditional. Love is accepting one another's failures, one another's idiosyncrasies, and the fact that you don't need to try to control the other person. You just need to accept them. And that doesn't mean that you don't tell them when things need to change, but you do accept the fact that they are who they are, and you love them where they are.
But as we talked about just a little while ago, we're living in these times where people don't seem to have time for each other. They come home late, especially younger people who are in all kinds of fields. I mean, law or business, or they're educators or doctors, you name it. I mean, look at the time that they're putting into their work. So love, if you were to, explain it. This is what I'd like you to explain from the book.
From my own experience, because my husband and I have been married almost 46 years now, I think one of the most helpful things we ever heard and learned was to try to set aside one night each week as a date night when you know it's just for you and your spouse. And as far as from the book goes, even though Alexa's father was responsible for something bad that happened to the mother, in the end, she has forgiven. I think forgiving is the number one factor, whether it's from the book or from your life. Forgiving and being able to tolerate each other's weaknesses and failures. I think that's pretty much love. You relive each time you think about the thing that's bothering you. You relive it each time, and that's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for the other person. So forgiving and getting past the bitterness is. It's key.
Yeah. Now, do you think it's appropriate? Because I talk to a lot of young couples who happen to live with one another, and when I ask them whether they like to get married, they look at me like I have crossed eyes. Marriage doesn't seem to be the thing of the future. It just seems to be the thing of the past. What do you think about that?
I think there's no commitment, and I think if there's no commitment, there's no real love. I think there can always be lust, and I think there can always be, a caring for one another. But that caring has to go to the point of being willing to be there until doomsday and holding each other's hands through whatever you experience in life. And I think marriage is the thing that a lot of people are afraid of because they just don't want to commit to that extent.
Yeah, and God invented marriage, and I think if you don't invite God into the marriage, then it's, why bother in the first place? Because, having been married for 7 years myself, I can tell you it's real work. And, if we both didn't share the same belief, I don't know how it would work at all.
Yeah, and a lot of people feel the way you do, but as I said before, I've had discussion after discussion with not only my authors, but younger people who, when you talk about relationships, they see people like 1 out of every 2 marriages end in divorce. And, that's sort of what they look at, and they say, jump in.
Yeah, I have heard that as far as like couples who actually go to church every week, that the rate is completely different. I've heard that it's in the upper 80s or 90s. If you're actually going and you invite God into the marriage and it's a union of the three strands, that it's completely different. And a lot of people will get married in the church, and that's the last time they ever set foot in the church. But for me, it's got to come from the love of God and for each other, and you both have to be whole people. Like the phrase "you complete me." You both have to be whole people. Because if you're both, half people, then I don't know how that's going to work either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, CB.
I just wanted to say that it's very, very important that you are not just staying with each other out of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be more involved. I think, first of all, people should be best friends. Because when the romance wears kind of thin, you've got to have something to rely on more than just the attraction. Because, let's face it, there's always somebody else out there you find attractive. So what's going to make you stay with this one person? It's going to be the friendship and the knowing each other. And other marriages, if you leave the person that you're married to and you go looking for someone else, how do you know that that's going to end any better? And as a matter of fact, divorce has become easy to you over the long run. So, just keep jumping from one to the other. And you don't have memories to share. You don't have the children. You don't have the meaning of life that you have come to build with each other. And if there's just no lighthouse there. So it's like you're on the ship and the Lord is the lighthouse. And you better be trying to follow his direction and not just your own.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, CB, that you instilled that in Dan, and that's one of the missing pieces of a lot of people's relationships with their children, is that they don't describe and don't have discussions which motivate the child or inspire the child to want to have better relationships when they get older, or exciting and interesting relationships. And that has to do with even friendship as well. So what do you also, Dan, from that standpoint, do you think that as you publish these books, are you going to choose not only your trilogy, but other people's books that really get into the whole idea of relationships, or what do you have in mind? What's coming up?
Well, we have so many concepts and we've brainstormed on so many things. I don't really think that we can handle anybody else's work right now. We are actually working on some sci-fi books. CB has written some children's poetry books that I actually executed as a design project at school. And sorry, there's a plane flying overhead. We're not in a flight pattern here, but
no, I don't hear it.
Weird.
I don't hear it.
Okay, good.
I think our audience will be fine.
Okay, good. But so we have so many projects lined up, and I don't think we could possibly squeeze in anybody else's right now. And we're actually trying to turn the first book into an audio drama podcast, editing and recording some sounds and downloading sounds from a service we subscribe to. And so we've got so many projects lined up that I don't think we could handle anybody else's right now. And two, we've had to fight for this. This has been a side hustle for 10 years, and finally we have the time to focus on it. So someone would have to make us an incredible offer for me to pull either of us off of what we're doing currently.
Well,
we're always going to be open to the God's leading. So we would just have to say to you, I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Well, okay, and that makes a lot of sense. Paying attention to what you're doing and spending a lot of time doing it, because when you do that, it really ends up being very successful, much more than if you just shoved that aside and did somebody else's thing. But that leads me again to some of the questions that Dan, how did you come up with the current cover design for the first book of Alexa Sylvan Trilogy? I want our audience, by the way, to know that it's called Alexa Sylvan Trilogy. So
yes, and CB got the name Alexa way before Amazon coined Alexa, so about a decade. That's really interesting. And so I had started working on CB's books before I was in design school, and so I would come up with some cover designs that were things that I could could execute, even though they were not excellent. And it's hard designing for your mom and for yourself. That's one of the hardest things you could do, because you think, should I keep pushing? Is it excellent or is it good enough? And you know, when I show stuff to my mom, she likes it all. She's like, oh, it's great, and I know it's not great. And so so I took a little break for a while and had finished school in New York and had been working, you know, full time for a place and just gaining a lot of valuable experience. And I had been learning about photography as well, walking New York, and you know, took some photography classes. And then so I was thinking, okay, let me step back and just completely scratch all of the designs I've done for her. How would I approach this if this was a paying client? And I said, okay, I would want an actual model. And, you know, CB wrote it about a redhead who's an assassin. And so I'm like, okay, I picture a redhead in a red dress and, you know, some sort of a dark hallway. And so I ran the idea by CB, you know, sketched it out, and she's like, oh, that's cool. How are we going to do it? And so I was just thinking, all right, so let me see what the available resources are. So there was a friend at church who I knew was a model and an actress, and I ran the idea by her and, you know, told her what our budget was, and she was okay with the budget. And so we got a dress from Macy's on 34th and 7th. And then so we started talking about where I would shoot it and what time, and so the schedules aligned. And then it was funny because I wanted her to be holding a gun. And so I started researching, how do you get a gun in New York City? I'm sure with some law enforcement websites. But so it turns out that's nearly impossible. In order to get a gun and to use it in a photo shoot or a video production, you have to have $1 million of liability insurance. You have to rent from a prop house. And if you want to use it anywhere or display it, you need to have a police officer on set. So those were all barriers to entry that were just too great. So I decided I was just going to make a gun in Photoshop and stick it in her hand. So that's what I ended up doing. But then we found out that you cannot have a gun on the cover if you want to advertise on Amazon. So the current look has gone through a few iterations, and the most current one is more zoomed in, and I think it's the best one yet, because before Alexa was zoomed out, you could see all the way down to her shoes, and the gun was hiding, you know, just behind her dress on her right hip as she looks over her right shoulder, and zoomed in so that you see just below her elbow, and so you can advertise on Amazon, but so it's really hard to know when something is good enough and when you need to keep pushing. That's really for anybody designing for themselves and or family members.
But I think you, for the most part, have to use your instincts, because you can't always know what's going to work. Instincts are probably the best way to handle it. Now, that leads me to one last question for you, Dan, and that is entrepreneurship. You know, everybody today, and I shouldn't say everybody, but many people today want to be entrepreneurs. Would you recommend that they do such? Because look at all the obstacles. It took you 10 years. So what do you say to our audience about that?
I would say absolutely go for it. You know, I have actually had another project that didn't work. So I actually had invented a sportswear product that became an officially licensed collegiate product, and I just didn't have enough money to market it. But, you know, I learned a tremendous amount of valuable life lessons and entrepreneurial lessons, and you know, and I think one of the big things is God and His timing, and I don't think that was His timing. I think that was a really awesome learning experience, and you know, I was bootstrapping it, you know, still doing that on the side, and you know, just spending what little money I had, and took out a small loan, and you know, so I think one of the things that I learned is don't take out a loan. But anyway, so I would say absolutely you have to go for it. You don't want to be sitting back, you know, and even though it did take 10 years, I wish I would have started, you know, earlier. But again, I think it was all God's timing. And so, you know, it took 10 years, but 10 years later, here we are. And, you know, I think the key is to just break everything down into little chunks of projects that you can handle one day at a time, 1 year at a time, and figure out what's important and just go for it. And I would hate to be sitting around thinking, gosh, what if, you know, I had done something with that book? And, you know, so for me, it's not a question of should you. It's if you're passionate about it, that won't even be a choice you have to make.
I hear you. And CB, the books that are your thinking about. Your imagination must be amazing. I mean, you're coming up with characters and you're coming up with ideas for the books. I mean, where does it all come from?
I guess what you said. I guess I have a good imagination. Maybe it's more like inspiration. I'm not sure. But what's interesting is the sci-fi book that I am currently involved in. I can't claim it as all my own because Dan and his younger brother Mark are both helping to write this book, so it ought to be something else.
Yeah, and CB, when we were growing up, she would read children's stories to us, and she would do a different voice for every character, like a fox and a bear and all these things, and so the books would really come to life, and I think that has just been something that's been with her all along, and that's the reason why I knew she could do the audiobooks. We were actually, that's one of the reasons for the audiobooks was I had contacted a producer and I found out that 6 finished hours of audio, so basically one audiobook, is $3,000 for someone to produce. And I said, yeah, we already have 6 books, and I said, there's no way we're going to be able to do that. Either we're going to have to do it ourselves or not at all. And right. So we just got the equipment, and I knew CB could do it. It was just a matter of learning the technical stuff and, kind of the business end and learning GarageBand and getting all the mics. And, and she did have to redo the first book 3 times. I mean, it wasn't, always awesome, and I'm super demanding, and and in fact we even revised the print book, which means that we had to redo the audiobook as well. So it's but if we didn't love it, we would have quit. So
I hear you.
And I've got another idea of that question that you asked me. My degree from the University of Florida is in psychology. I've been observing and personality types all my life. Mm-hmm. I taught over 4,000 kids, and so I've just gotten to know quite a few of different types of personalities. And
CB will write a lot of people into the books, like in the Consuming Fire and Alexa Sylvan novel. The 2 main characters are Mark Truman and Daniel Gother. So after Mark and myself, and our dad John, who's actually on the team as well, he's our production assistant. I call him John or Dad, and just make all sorts of ridiculous requests daily to him. So basically, if you're a family member or someone that's close to CB a real character, chances are you'll be in one of her books.
Yeah, Susan, you never know.
My life is not all that interesting. I don't think you want to put me in the book.
But if we're writing about news producers or something along that line, you might wind up there.
Yeah, something, actually, I think I would make for a very interesting character, but, that's me speaking. But I want you, since it's almost the end of the show, what I would like you to do is tell us the name of the series or the book that is available and all of the things that are available and where people can get them and whatever other information you think would be viable or important for our audience to know. So step up, CB, and you too, Dan. Well, what do you want to tell our audience?
All right. Well, if you go to CB Hoffmann, that's C as in cat, B as in boy, and Hoffmann, you have to have 2 F's and 2 N's. So it's HOFFMANN.com, cbhoffmann.com/how-to. You will find a tutorial, I would say, on writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and we're adding cover designs and websites and all kinds of information as life goes on here.
Right now it's a PDF. We want to write a whole series of how-tos, just lessons that we have learned over the course of writing and designing websites and developing and learning more about photography and videography. And so we want to share those with people as little PDFs, and we're actually writing a book on that as well, just kind of everything we've learned to get where we are.
And if you go to CBHoffmann.com, you will find all of our books.
Yeah, and what you do is
even
go there.
The movie.
Yeah, well, that's all. Anyway, so if you go on the website and you click on purchase, then a pop-up will open, and there's links to iTunes, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble. And there's also a link to audible.com if you're interested in the audiobook. And the first book is available as a print book. We need to turn the rest of the books into print books, but, just need a minute to sit down and do that. But so we don't collect any information. And right now, all of the eBooks are only 99 cents. And so, so it's less than the cup of coffee, and hopefully people will share our taste and want to give them a shot. But we don't collect any information. It's through the major retailers, and so you don't have to worry about giving us your credit card information.
With that in mind, it's very important that people really get in touch with Dan and CB, because the two of you as a team and as a family team can teach so much to so many people who want to get involved in the self-publishing business and learning websites and various other things. Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you, Dan, and I want to thank you, CB, for being on the Susan Brender Show. It certainly has been a pleasure, and we've learned a lot, and I certainly learned a lot. So thank you very much.
The pleasure has been all ours. Thanks for having us.
It's been great getting to know you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.